Thank you, Jorgen, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll talk about the use of biomethane and hydrogen as transport fuels. So we will focus on this use sector for this last presentation. I will start by giving you an overview of biomethane mobility, how it looks today in Europe. And first, I don't need to tell you why we are talking about biomethane mobility. You know that very well. The advantage is clearly that biomethane is a carbon neutral solution for the transport sector. And we know how difficult it is to decarbonize the transport sector. It's a particularly attractive solution, especially for trucks, for heavy duty vehicles that are quite difficult to decarbonize. And even more biomethane can be carbon negative depending on the feedstock sources. So that's why we're interested in this solution. And we heard about biomethane availability and scalability today, but looking at the transport sector specifically, what does that mean? This is based on analysis done by NGVA Europe together with the European Biogas Association. And what is interesting is that we can, if we look at 2030, and projection is that 40% of the gas used in by gas vehicles, so using the transport sector, will be biomethane. This represents just 117 terawatt hours, which is actually less than 10% of the total EU production capacity. So it just shows that biomethane, using biomethane in transport will not use all the biomethane available for the different sectors, but still can make a significant contribution and complement other solutions to decarbonize mobility. What's the situation today with biomethane availability? That shows the share of biomethane at CNG stations in Europe today. And we heard already that Scandinavia is really leading the game on this, with almost 100% biomethane already in Denmark, Sweden, but also the UK and the Netherlands are not far behind. And also some countries at around 60%, Norway, Germany, and quickly increasing. So in Europe overall, that's 25% already, so significant and growing. And we see that there is a lot potential to grow more. So of course, domestically produced fuel and domestically produced vehicles also, especially when comparing with battery electric vehicles and a lot of components and materials that come from other places. When looking at LNG stations now, it's quite impressive actually, the growth of the fueling infrastructure in Europe. We are now almost at 550 LNG stations. It's like plus 10% every 2-3 months. Quite a good spread in a number of countries now, but still Central Europe, for example, that is just starting. So in some countries, there are now pretty good infrastructure. In other countries, it's really just starting to ramp up, but still quite interesting. And we heard about also some bio-LNG becoming available, even though it's not as much as for CNG stations, but still it's also coming, and that's very good. Then vehicles, and the market for vehicles is that now the growth is really driven by the truck sector. That's the gas, so CNG and LNG vehicle registrations in 2021. And really, it's quite interesting to see the demand for CNG and LNG trucks growing by 40% in 2021. and that has been growing constantly over the recent years. Some countries with really, really high numbers, France, Germany, Poland. So that's really interesting to see that the market is going for this solution. And there are many large fleets now going for CNG and LNG trucks, but also going biomethane, bio-CNG, bio-LNG, because really that's the practical and affordable solution they have to switch to carbon neutrality for their transport operations. So good developments in the market. Now let's talk a little bit about policy. And that's a bit more challenging in this respect. I will give you an overview about some key files that are on the agenda this year. And it's quite interesting to see that despite the growth in the market, the interest in the market, it's quite a fight on the policy front to have biomethane mobility recognized, because policymakers look at an ideal 2050 world where everything is electrified, is so-called zero emission. So it's really hard to get recognition for biomethane mobility. There are some really important files on the table this year. You see CO2 emission standards for cars and vans in several places here. I will come back to this one because that's really a key one that is being debated currently. On top of this one, there's the revision of the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive that was proposed last year, but being debated now in the Parliament and Council, that proposes a lot of support for electric charging infrastructure, hydrogen infrastructure, but we also still need some continued support for CNG and LNG infrastructure, so fighting for that. We talked about the Repower EU plan. There were discussions about it earlier. I just want to mention that from the transport sector perspective, we need to make sure that some of this biomethane will be available for the transport sector. And then there are several files that are really important to determine what the vehicle manufacturers, what types of vehicles they will develop for the future. The Euro 7 emission standards proposal that is coming this summer is part of it, because it could, depending on the limits, it could discourage the vehicle manufacturers to develop natural gas vehicles. But the CO2 standards particularly is important. And that's the proposal from the Commission from last summer is to have 100% CO2 reduction by 2035 for all new cars. What that means, and it's counted, tailpipe only. So what that means is basically electrification only, meaning more or less the end of internal combustion engines. And that's being debated now in the Parliament. It raised industry, transport and environment committees. They have all been voting on that in the last few weeks. And there is a small majority supporting this high level, this general objective of proposed by the European Commission. But there's also some concerns raised by a number of MEPs with this approach. And similarly, the Council is debating on this position, and they are proposing to follow, to support this proposal from the Commission. But still, a number of member states are quite concerned by this idea that the affordability, for example, of mobility might become quite an issue if we go only electric. And then we even have a similar approach and similar revision coming at the end of the year for trucks. How can we change the approach for these CO2 standards? What is the solution, or what can be a solution? Of course, ideally, we would move to a life cycle or well-to-wheel approach, but that's basically not possible for a piece of regulation that is focused on vehicles, on CO2 emissions from vehicles. So one solution is to have a crediting scheme, a voluntary scheme that would enable the vehicle manufacturers to purchase credits from fuel suppliers, and by doing that, to account for the savings generated by the use of renewable fuels in the vehicles itself. And that would come on top of the red target to not overlap with the Renewable Energy Directive objectives. This approach is supported by the Transport Committee of the European Parliament that voted in favor of that. It's also supported by a number of other members of the European Parliament, even though not half, but close to half probably in the other committees, and some member states. So that's really still on the debate, on the table, and it means there's still a chance for light-duty vehicles to have a recognition especially for biomethane mobility, but that would be for renewable fuels in general. And also more chances for heavy-duty vehicles towards the end of the year, because there's more recognition that for heavy-duty vehicles, electrifying everything is not a solution. So good to have that in mind for probably everyone in this room, because we need support to spread the word even further. Now, I take my Westport Fuel Systems hat and we'll talk a bit about hydrogen mobility and the synergies also with biomethane. Just one thing I want to mention, because that's not the topic, but there was a comment earlier about the share of hydrogen that can be used in natural gas vehicles. Yes, there's a limit of 2% today in the regulation, but there are studies ongoing to assess the compatibility of the current vehicles with 10% hydrogen share. And so maybe actually all the fleet of CNG vehicles is already compatible with a 10% share. And then there's potential to grow higher. So as for blending hydrogen in the grid, there's that type of opportunity and it's being explored. But now I want to focus on heavy duty vehicles for this part, and talk about another solution. I will just tell you very quickly a few words about who we are. Westport Fuel Systems, we develop components and systems for vehicles. We are specialized in everything related to alternative fuel, to even gaseous fuels. And so we work with vehicle manufacturers for the different types of vehicles. For the heavy duty sector, we are really looking for the most affordable and practical ways to decarbonize the transport sector. And there's a piece of news I want to share with you today, and this is this truck. That's something we unveiled just last week, and that's what we call our first hydrogen HPDI truck. You don't need to know everything about what it is, but what is interesting for you probably is that it's a hydrogen truck, but without a fuel cell. And it's also kind of the brother of an LNG truck or bio-LNG truck. And this truck is already running, is being tested. Without getting into the vehicle technology details, I just want to explain you briefly why it's the brother, I'm saying the brother of the LNG truck. We have a fuel system that is used, that is commercialized in LNG trucks in Europe today. It's now deployed in thousands of units. And what we have done is we are applying the same technology, so many same components, the same engine architecture, but using hydrogen instead of LNG. What that means is that we are reusing, when producing this vehicle, reusing a lot of, producing the same components, so reusing the same manufacturing infrastructure, which means faster deployment and stimulating demand for both hydrogen and biomethane, bio-LNG version. In terms of performance, this is quite interesting as well, because when we compare with diesel, which is our base comparison, it's actually better performance in many respects when using hydrogen. More power, better efficiency, and of course, hydrogen is zero tailpipe CO2. Plus also advantages in terms of fuel quality, because you don't need as pure hydrogen as you would need for fuel cells. There are very interesting CO2 reductions as well, and here it's interesting to compare the different solutions. Compared to the slide you've seen at the beginning, here we have added this hydrogen HPDI solution. Of course, when looking at tailpipe CO2 reductions in blue, as soon as you use hydrogen at the tailpipe, you have it doesn't generate CO2. But when looking at well-to-wheel emissions, and we have included manufacturing here, it's quite interesting to see that if you compare biomethane, a mix of 40% biomethane with a solution that uses blue hydrogen, whether it's with an internal combustion engine or with the fuel cell, you're actually very similar in terms of the CO2 reductions you achieve. So that really shows how equally attractive all these solutions are from a decarbonization point of view. And when looking at costs, here we have assessed the CO2 abatement costs and compared for the different technologies. And here as well, very interesting, I think, to see that with biomethane, you get the highest reductions per euro invested. Then it's also quite interesting when using hydrogen internal combustion engines, and it's always more interesting than using fuel cell electric vehicles. So again, interesting to have both hydrogen and biomethane solutions that can complement each other. Just to summarize the whole presentation, biomethane mobility continues to grow, increasing demand, increasing interest in particularly biomethane, and there are opportunities for biomethane to accelerate really transport decarbonization, with the right policy signals, which is not entirely the case today. And on top of that, we think that the deployment of hydrogen internal combustion engines can complement pretty well and stimulate the market for both solutions. With this, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.